afternoon, everyone. How's the mic working?
Not on yet. Not on yet.
It's not on yet. All right, let's check it out. Don't take any pictures just yet.
Yeah, that sounds like something.
Does that sound like the mic is working? All right, we've just overcome the first challenge of the afternoon. Well, I just want to welcome you all. My name is Mike Sosolsky, and I'm the president of Washington College, and it is just delightful to see you all here today for this really, really special event. Folks in Maryland know Heather Mazier as a former state legislator and a candidate for Congress in the U.S. First District. Her policy skills and tireless advocacy shepherded new laws on the books to do really wonderful things like expand health access for middle-class families and pregnant women, to protect our environment and water supplies from the dangers of fracking for natural gas, and also to enshrine marriage rights for LGBTQ families, and to lift up small businesses and family budgets alike through smart, common-sense economic reforms. But we in Chestertown, we're lucky. We get to know Heather as a neighbor and a friend and a farmer and the leader of a visionary not-for-profit organization. It's through Heather's work as the founder and CEO of the We Are One Alliance and as the steward of innovative programming at Apotheosis Farm that she created a relationship with tonight's very special guest. When Heather called me to tell me about Dr. Trent, I just jumped at the chance to bring her to our campus. We're so honored to welcome you to Washington College, Dr. Trent. I know you have already joined 2 of our classes, and you've had lunch with a number of our students and faculty, and I am incredibly grateful for her generosity with her time today and yesterday. I'm also eagerly anticipating the conversation that Heather and Dr. Trent will have here this afternoon. So without further ado, without making you listen to more from me, I want to welcome our good friend and neighbor, Heather Mazier, to the stage to kick things off.
Welcome, everyone. I must start this evening with a deep bow of gratitude to President Mike Sosolsky. He did not hesitate for one moment when I presented him with the opportunity to bring Dr. Trent to our community. He instinctively knew that this would be a gift to both the college campus and indeed to the entire Eastern Shore, to have a woman of such stature, such deep heart, joining us for this night of sacred dreaming. You're going to learn quite a bit this evening about my friend Tererai during our conversation over the next hour. But I think the essence of who she is and the inspiration that she brings to us tonight was beautifully captured by leaders at Manery's Dream Alliance here in Chestertown. After we visited yesterday, they wrote, "We were honored, inspired, and in awe by Dr. Trent's visit. She spoke wisdom and energy into us all. We are forever changed by her presence." She spoke wisdom and energy into us all. That's part of what is so magical about Tererai. She sees into the heart of humanity and freely shares her profound wisdom and her gracious energy with every soul that she touches. You're going to experience tonight the feeling of being blessed by someone's unique presence. Now, you've already heard that she's Oprah Winfrey's all-time favorite guest. Let's hear in her own words why. that would be a...
Tererai Trent grew up in this remote village in Zimbabwe. She was raised in a hut with no running water or electricity and little hope for the future. She traveled back here to tell us her remarkable story.
They're saying work hard, work hard. Now we welcome Tererai, she has worked hard.
It was a homecoming for an unlikely hero. To these women, Tererai Trent has become a symbol of hope.
As a little girl, I was desperate to learn. I was secretly doing my brother's homework, and I learned to read and write from my brother's books.
Eventually, a teacher discovered their secret and begged Tererai's father to let her come to school. But after only 2 terms, Tererai was married off, and by the time she was 18, she was already a mother of 3.
When my husband realized that I wanted to have an education, he would beat me. I have nightmares of that time of my life.
In 1991, a woman from an organization called Heifer International visited Tererai's village.
She started asking us what our hopes and what our dreams. And I remember very clearly saying, my name is Tererai and I want to go to America to have an education. And she just looked at me, if you desire those things, it is achievable. Then my mother said, write those dreams down on paper and bury them. And if you truly believe in those dreams, then you'll see them grow and grow and grow.
Tererai wrote down her dreams that day, placed them in a scrap of tin, and buried them under a rock.
There it is. My mother said, you are the last person to break this vicious circle of poverty, and I want you to do that. And I did it. I did it.
I wanted to surprise her because, as often happens with people who are living from the fullest part of themselves, you work hard, you accomplish, and then you want to share those accomplishments, what you've achieved, with other people. And so I wanted to help her make that dream come true. And so what did it feel to walk across that stage just this past year and get your doctorate degree?
It was so unbelievable.
What is your dream now?
I feel I need to give back. It's not only about Tererai, but it is about thousands and millions of children that are out there, thousands and millions of girls that are not having the education. I need to build a school in my village.
Trying to build a school.
I'm trying to build a school.
When Tererai was here in 2009, we got a glimpse at the horrible conditions of the school. The buildings are literally falling apart, holes in the ceilings, force children to sit along the walls when it rains. And most of the classrooms don't have desks, so the students do all their reading and writing on the floor. And the teachers have no supplies, and as a result, there's a dismal 14% pass rate. I have been so moved by your story. Your story is, at the core of everything I believe in the possibility of a human life here on earth. And for that reason, I am going to help you rebuild your school. I'm donating $1.5 million. Yes. I'm donating $1.5 million and I want you to have help doing it because I know it's hard. Save the Children is going to spend 3 years working with teachers and children and parents in the area to improve literacy and basic education. So ultimately, 4,000 children will have a better education because of you. We're going to build a school together. We are going to build a school! It is achievable! And it is achievable! That makes me so happy. It makes me so happy. If you will roll the tape and you'll see that moment where when she first comes out and we first look at each other, that is just a solid moment. That is a woman to woman. That is I see you, I know who you are, and I know what it takes to do what you have done. That's what I call holy moments, when you look at somebody and you feel the fullness of who they really are. That's what that moment is about.
In Tererai's native language, Tinagona, it is achievable. You're going to hear so much about that. Without further ado, please give a warm Washington College and Eastern Shore welcome to the incomparable Dr. Tererai Trent. Okay, there we go. Dr. Trent, welcome, welcome, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. Thank you. I'm so thrilled to be here.
You have such an incredible story to share. It's hard to even know where to begin in what could be, we could sit here for days, let me tell you, days listening to her stories. But would you start telling us a little bit about your path in your life, perhaps maybe with a little bit about where you are from, your grandmother's, that matriarchal tradition that has influenced you so much?
Let me, I tend to use my hands, but I hope I'll be loud enough. So I come from this long line of generations of women who had been denied their right to education, women who had been denied their right to dignity. And I always think about my grandmother when I tell where I am coming from, because I am my grandmother's daughter, my grandmother's grandchild. My grandmother was a wise woman, despite the fact that she was denied that right to her education. She was smart, because, you know, I grew up in this rural community where we have no running water, no electricity. I come from a country that used to be known as Rhodesia and now is known as Zimbabwe. So I am a product of war, the war that liberated my country. But what's interesting about the lack of education for my grandmother and the women in the community was they were what I call the wisdom whisperers, the librarians of our memories as we were growing, because we would sit around this open fire and listen to these great stories from my grandmother. The stories of surviving in this terrain which was not even friendly to them, but they survived. They were resilient women. And I remember my grandmother every evening in this hut where it's built out of mud and there's no running water, there's no electricity. The community members would come and knock. Would you mind to rise and come and help deliver babies? So she would rise and go and deliver babies. And it was interesting because as she was getting old, she had delivered so many babies. And I was young, around 6 years of age, and my grandmother would say, you know, my eyes are failing me, because all of a sudden she's shaking, her hands are shaking, and her eyes are failing, and she would say, baby girl, look at these eyes, look at these hands. These hands are shaking because these hands, they delivered so many babies. And look at these eyes. These eyes are getting blind. I can't see very well with these eyes, because these eyes, they have seen so many vaginas. And I am thinking, vagina? if my grandmother had had an education, if my grandmother had not been denied that right to her education, that right to her dignity, I bet you my grandmother would have become one of the best gynecologists in the whole world. And that's why I fight for education. That's where I'm coming from.
And your grandmother also is from a lineage of women. You are this indomitable spirit that has risen above generations of poverty and illiteracy and early marriage. This is something that has been handed down through generations. Tell us a little bit about that experience in your life.
Yeah. You know, I would always visualize my great-grandmother was born into this race. How many of you are familiar with this race where you find you have 6 runners, and in front of them there are also another 6 set of runners, but they are running, they are holding these sticks, and the aim is to hand over the sticks to the next set of runners. How many of you are familiar with that? And what are those sticks that they are holding? Baton. And I brought you one. I did. I brought you one. Let me see if I can find my baton. So I would always visualize my great-grandmother when she was born. She was born into this race, the race that she never defined, and this relay, it's an ugly relay, and I'm going to call that relay, the race, the baton of poverty. She's holding this baton, the baton of early marriage, the baton of illiteracy, the baton of abuse, the baton of a colonial system that never respected her as a black woman. And she's running with this baton. She's running so fast. She hands over this baton to my grandmother. My grandmother grabs this baton of poverty, this baton of early marriage, the baton of illiteracy, the baton of abuse. She's running so fast with this baton, my grandmother. My grandmother hands over this baton to my mother so my mother could start her own race, the race of illiteracy. She's running with this baton, the baton of early marriage. She runs so fast, she hands over this baton to me, and I grabbed this baton of early marriage. Remember, by the time I was 14 years of age, I had already had a baby, and by the time I was 18 years of age, I had delivered 4 babies, and one of the children died as an infant because I could not produce enough milk. I was a child myself. And I'm running, and I reached a point where I dropped this baton, and I said, that's just bullshit. That's not my baton. That's not my race. I need to ride a different baton. I need to run with a different one. I need to reshift this one. There is no way out. I'm going to pass on this baton to my children. It's a generational curse. We all have different batons in our lives. Sometimes we need to say, do I need to carry it on, or I need to drop it down and rechange this baton and run with a different baton. So that's what I did.
And in dropping that baton, you changed the narrative of your life and for generations to come by really living into the notion of honoring and finding and nurturing, igniting a sacred dream.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about your first really impactful moment where you were asked about what your dreams are.
Yeah. So, because as I said, I was born and bred in Rhodesia, and all of a sudden, Rhodesia became Zimbabwe. We were now independent. And I am a young woman already with children. And for some interesting reasons, when we became, because Zimbabwe became the last country to gain its independence, and all of a sudden we find Europeans coming into Zimbabwe, Australians coming in, Americans coming in. They were all coming to study what we call anthropology, politics, and they wanted to understand rural life. And so there was something about these women. There were women coming in. And I loved that something, but I didn't know what it was. There was a way in which these women would walk with that confidence. And there was also a way they would open their bags and find some writing pad or reading something. And they would always open those pages. Remember, I didn't understand any English. So all I could hear amongst these women was blah, 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 blah. And the other one would say, fantastic, fantastic. And they would wear their glasses, put them somewhere there, and put them in their head, and put them somewhere there, blah, 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 fantastic. And I thought wearing glasses was a sign of education. And I said, I want those glasses, I want that confidence, I want that walk, I want to get an education. One of the women found me sitting in a circle with other women, and she asked me one question that I'll never forget, and I think it's a question that shaped who I am. She asked, what are your dreams? Huh? And I'm thinking to myself, me, black woman, marginalized, no education, illiterate, I'm supposed to dream. You American woman, you must be crazy. I didn't say that, but I was thinking to myself. The other women in the circle, they talked about the need to educate their children, the need to have food security at household level, the need to have clothing for their children. I was quiet. She looked at me. Young woman, you haven't said anything. And maybe it was the way she kept on looking at me. Maybe it was the way she nudged me. When I opened my mouth, I became a chatterbox. I said, I want to go to America. I want to have an undergraduate degree. I want to have a master's, and I want to have a PhD. There was silence. I could feel my vulnerability leaking. I didn't know what to say. But I could sense the women in the circle saying, oh, look at you. How can you talk about going to America, let alone talk about a PhD? You are expecting your number 4 child. You have no high school education. How can you even dream of that? I was silent. And this stranger said, now listen. If you believe in your dreams, they are achievable. Oh, that's all I wanted to hear. Sometimes in our lives, when we are living a life of abuse, when we are living a challenging life, we need someone who can just look into our eyes and see something that we are not seeing in our own life. And I said, yes, I want to have an education. And she said, yes, it is achievable. She used the word tinogona. In my culture, tinogona, it means it is achievable. Whatever you set your intentions, whatever you believe, it is achievable. So I ran to my mother, and I told my mother, I met a stranger who made me believe in my dreams. I didn't even know her name. And my mother said, Tererai, if you believe in what this stranger has said to you, and you work hard, not only are you defining who you are as a woman, but you are also defining every life that comes out of your womb in generations to come. My mother was an illiterate woman, but she had wisdom, and that was the inheritance that I wanted in that moment. She said, so listen, write down your dreams and bury them the same way we bury the umbilical cord. You know, I come from this culture. When a child is born, the female elders of the village, the ones that I call the wisdom whisperers, the librarians of our memories. They would gather around this infant. They would snip the umbilical cord or the birth cord, and they would find the mother's old dress. They would tear a small piece, tie the umbilical cord, bury the umbilical cord deep down under the ground, with the belief that when this child grows, wherever they go, the umbilical cord will always remind them of their birthplace. So my mother said, Tererai, write down your dreams and bury them. The word bury and plant in my culture, they are the same. We plant our seeds in the ground. We cover the seed. We bury the seed so that the birds of the earth, they won't come in. The insects, they won't get to our seed. So she said, plant, bury your dreams, and then you will see them grow and grow. I knew I needed to do that, so I was ready with my 4 dreams to go to America, to have an undergraduate, to have a master's, to have a PhD. My mother said, Tererai, I see your 4 dreams, but listen, child. These dreams are all personal dreams. Your dreams in this life, they will have greater meaning when they are tied to the betterment of your community. I had no idea what my mother is talking about, and I said, but I have my 4 dreams, and she said, listen, child, your dreams in this life, they will have greater meaning, they will have deeper meaning when they are connected, when they are tied to the greater good. I would end up writing my number 5 dream. When I'm done, I want to come back and improve the lives of women and girls in my community. I had no idea what I was writing about on that 5th dream. I buried those dreams deep down under the ground. And it will take me 8 years, and I call those 8 freaking years. Because I didn't have a high school education. 8 years of correspondence to achieve my high school education. I wasn't a smart woman. For me to get my high school education, I needed 5 subjects. And we were still under the colonial British system of education, so it meant I had to do correspondence and send these assignment papers to a place called Cambridge, where they were going to be graded. And because I was living in the rural areas, it would take 3-6 months to get the papers back. And my mother could not have enough money for the 5 subjects because each one required £20. So at any given time, I would only write 2 subjects. And I would wait for those 6 months for that brown envelope to come from Cambridge. I would open that brown envelope, and there was U, ungraded, F, failure. I would go back to my mother. I failed, mother. My mother would say, Tererai, there are no failures in this household. There are no failures in this family. There are no failures in this community. She would grow vegetables. She would sell guavas and mangoes, raise another 40 pounds, and I would write my assignments, send to this place. After 6 months, the brown envelope comes, and I would open that brown envelope. I have a U ungraded. I have failure. Mother, I have failed again. My mother said, no, there are no failures. You fall and you rise. And if you define yourself as a failure, you silence not only who you are, but you're silencing yourself, you're also silencing generations to come. After 8 years, 8 freaking years, I would open that brown envelope and I have A's and B's. I tell this story to encourage everyone to say, failure is not a failure. It's resilience. it's never giving up. Even if you fail, you wake up, because you're not defining who you are, you're also defining generations to come.
Your mother has had such an incredible impact on your life, and in particular, pushing you to write that fifth dream, and we'll talk in a minute about the community impact that that fifth dream has generated in Matau in Zimbabwe. But let's also connect her and your community to something that isn't in the book. So you being here, you get to hear a story that isn't in the book, which is what your community did to actually help you make it to America with this dream.
So after I had buried my dream, there was also the question of money, because I needed to come to America. And I used to work for this NGO as a volunteer, but they would also give me some money, and I would hide my money, because I was married to this abusive man who would take all my money. But you know, it's funny, because in our household, there's always this bag of cornmeal. And women, they use this bag of cornmeal to cook sadza. No man would touch that bag, so I would hide my money deep down under that cornmeal, and sometimes ask my sisters and my sister-in-laws to keep that money. And so there's an interesting story, because my grandmother would say to me, Tererai, now you have buried those dreams, and I want you to go to this place where you have buried the dreams, and sit there and visualize as though you have achieved those dreams. I want you to close your eyes and feel the edges of those dreams and feel the colors of those dreams. So I would go to this place where I had planted my dreams, and I would visualize myself getting into an aeroplane. Remember, in Zimbabwe, we did not have aeroplanes, and I had not been in an aeroplane. The only thing that I knew as an aeroplane were the war helicopters, the helicopters that would come during the war, and I would visualize myself getting into that helicopter and getting into this place called America. And I would visualize myself getting into the aeroplane and arriving at this place in America and see tall buildings, and I'd visualize myself carrying some bags and getting into the classroom. So the day that I received that letter from Oklahoma State University to say I had been accepted to pursue a program in agriculture, when I went to that small airport, getting into that aeroplane, there was this deja vu feeling that I've been here before, because I had visualized that. But getting into that aeroplane, I needed money. And so when I started counting all the monies that were in the bags, I was short about $640 for my airfare. And I went to my mother and I said, Mother, you know my dream. I am short $640.
Because you're not just getting airfare for yourself, you're taking children with you as well.
Because I had a 9-year-old child, a girl, that time. The others were still young. And I knew if I go to America and leave this child, "11 years to come, when she's 11-year-old, she might get married, forced into marriage." And I didn't want that. So I had to save all the money and make sure that at least I take my children with me. But I was short $640. There was no way out I could have come leaving my children, because my mother had said, if you achieve these dreams, not only are you defining who you are also defining everything that came out of your womb and generations to come. How can I leave my children behind? So my mother said, let's see what we can do. Without telling me, she went to the village head. You know, we live in the villages, so the village head, and she said, you know, Tererai has this dream but I'm not telling her because I don't want to raise her expectations. What can we do so that she can get the $640? That's a lot of money in Zimbabwe, $640. So the headman said, don't worry, I'll see what I can do. He rallied the whole community and said, you can sell your chickens, you can sell guavas, you can bring pennies, whatever. So old men and old women, every household, they would gather these pennies, they would sell their chickens, they would sell their mangoes, and each one would bring pennies and dollars, tattered money, and bring it to the headman. And I didn't know that. One day I woke up and I went to the kitchen to try to get the fire going, and I saw an old man sitting there, and I ran back to my mother. I said, there's a man sitting there. I didn't take a look at him. My mother went to the kitchen and said, oh, it is the headman. And the headman was sitting there, and they called me in, and there was the $600 in pennies and dollars for me to come to America.
And how fitting that your community supported you to come to America because of this very deep fifth dream that you had on giving back to your community. Speak a little bit about the community impact of this fifth dream.
So the fifth dream, after I came to America, I did my undergraduate degree and I did my master's. Undergraduate in agriculture, master's in plant pathology. And I reached a point where I said I need to take a break because when my kids joined me, I realized all of a sudden when they were brushing their teeth, the gums were bleeding and I knew they were missing fruits and vegetables. Back home in Africa, for those who have been to Africa, you can grow anything and it will grow. We grew up eating vegetables and fruits. You can go to the forest. You just watch what the monkeys and baboons are eating, what the birds are eating, you eat it. And I am in America. All of a sudden, I am working in these restaurants, McDonald's and these places, and feeding the kids. You know, I remember at times, you know, I'm serving and I'll tell my colleagues, you know, whatever food is left by the diners, don't throw it out, please. So they would bring me bags of French fries and burgers, and I would take them and go and feed the children. And the children were eating something that they had never eaten. I came to America, I had never tasted Coca-Cola or even candies. All of a sudden we were eating candies, and so it affected their gums. And I said, I'm going to take a break. And I went to the university and I said, it's one thing for me to pursue my dream, but it's another to see the suffering of my children. And they said, well, you know what? You know you are missing vegetables. And I said, yes, I need vegetables. I need to feed the kids vegetables. Vegetables and fruits are so expensive in America. So you find the poor, they rely on French fries, Coca-Cola. And I'm thinking, gosh. And the university said, you know, some of these stores, at the end of the day, they have fruits and vegetables that are going bad. We hope you don't mind to feed your kids. We can go and they can give you. So I went to the store. The store manager said, no, we can't do that, to give you the leftover fruits and vegetables that are going bad. You know, in case you feed your kids, if anything happens to your kids, you might end up suing us. I raised my hand. I said, no, I have no dime to sue anybody. Please give me fruits and vegetables so I can feed the kids. I am so teary. I'm so emotional. The manager is also emotional. He says, no, baby girl, don't cry. Do you have a watch? And I said, I can get one. He said, yes, the deal. I'm not going to hand you the fruits and vegetables that are bad. What I'm going to do is I'm going to put them in a cardboard box, and I'll place that cardboard box outside, because we are not allowed to give you these things, but we are going to place them outside near the trash can. Please make sure 4 o'clock you are here to pick your cardboard box. 99% of the time, I was late to that cardboard box. And I would find the cardboard box has already been placed in the trash can. Some of the fruits and vegetables have already spilled. and I'll just gather everything, wash, feed my kids, ask myself, who am I to complain that my children are eating from the trash can fruits that have spilled in a trash can when I know there are thousands, if not hundreds, of homeless kids in sub-Saharan Africa who are eating from dirty trash cans. At least the American trash can, someone is washing it. Who am I to even complain that I live in a trailer house when it rains? I find myself with the kids in a corner because the roof is dilapidated and I would wait up until the rains are over. Who am I even to complain when I know in America there are many women who are on the streets, they can't find a shelter. At least I can see the light at the end of my tunnel. That grounded me so much. So after getting my kids fed and after achieving my master's, I decided to go and apply for a job, and I got accepted at a place called Little Rock, Arkansas. And my first 2 weeks in that job, I met this woman, and she looked at me, she said, I think I know you. And I am thinking, you know, I've met so many American women, I don't know what you're talking about. And she said, I think I know you, and I'm thinking to myself, I've met so many white women. She said, are you not from Zimbabwe? It dawned on me in that moment that this is the very woman that I had met some 14 years ago in my village. The woman who had inspired me to believe in my dreams. What are the odds? She's now the CEO and president of Heifer International. And I remember my first trip going home, and I dug that place where I buried my dreams, checked going to America, checked undergraduate, checked masters, reburied those dreams because I knew there were two dreams that I needed to achieve, my PhD and giving back to the community. I had no idea, but I reburied those dreams, came back to America, enrolled myself at Western Michigan University, completed my PhD in statistics and measurement. Difficult subject for me. I've always been in the oldest student in every class that I took, but I never cared because I knew I was not going to pass on this baton to the next generation. I remember after I had completed my PhD and I was walking through that podium where the professors are wearing their big gowns and the students are all over, and I'm going to receive that paper, and I realized it had taken me 20 years from the day that I buried my dreams to the day that I have achieved my PhD. Never give up. Never, never. And my closing statement, I know there are lawyers in this room, please forgive me if I butcher that closing statement. If we give education opportunities to those who are torn down and marginalized by the social ills of our time, they can achieve their dreams. If we give education opportunities to women and girls, it is the best investment any community, any society, any government could do, because women and girls are the healers of this nation. If we believe in the dreams of others, they can achieve their dreams. Now I have my PhD and I'm thinking, how on earth was I going to achieve this community dream? Mother, why did I listen to you? Why did I even included this dream? Why can't I just live in America, work in America? I have a PhD. I can be employed as a researcher. I can do anything, but I could not find sleep. I decided I was going to sell T-shirts. And I brought you a T-shirt. I'm not marketing. Oh, I left my T-shirts. Oh, there it is. I decided I'm going to come up with a T-shirt because that woman, she had said Tinogona. I'm going to have Tinogona. It is achievable, and I'm going to sell thousands. and make enough money and go back home and rebuild schools. Oh, I was on fire. Guess what? I only sold 20 t-shirts, and mostly to my American friends. I was devastated. I didn't know what to do. I wanted to go back and make a difference. I had this hunger. There are two kinds of hungers in our life. There is the little hunger. The little hunger is all about, I want it now. It's all about immediate gratification. It's all about, am I good enough? We are always judging ourselves. That's the little hunger. And you can never satisfy that little hunger. I had this great hunger. The greatest of all hungers in our lives. Hunger to make a meaningful life. I wanted to go and change life. So then I got this phone call, the most memorable call of my life, from Oprah Winfrey. The rest is history. She donated 1.5 million and brought in an organization. And today, 40,000 kids from my community have walked through our education system. More than 60 students are in different universities pursuing their education. Their grandmothers and their mothers, they can't even read and write. We are defining, we are changing this pattern.
Can you speak a little bit more to the aspect of the little hunger versus the big hunger? As people are sitting here in the audience today, being inspired by you to think about, what are my sacred dreams that are left undone? And how can I, no matter what stage of life I am in, continue to connect to that feeling of the purpose of why I'm here, what brings me meaning? What advice would you give to the people who are here today about what process they should go through to connect with, remember, ignite, and nurture their sacred dreams?
You know, I have learned so much from the Native Americans in this country and so much from indigenous communities in this country, so much from the African Americans in this country. They say, humankind has not woven the web of life. We are but one thread within it. Whatever we do to the web, we do it to ourselves. All things are bound together. All things are connected. Our very survival is connected to the survival of others. Then, how do we find meaning? The word Ubuntu resonates so much with me, and I hope it will resonate with you. Ubuntu, it is the essence of our humanity, is the African philosophy. I am because we are. Since we are, therefore, I am. That's where we get our great hunger. And I want to ask you, Heather, the Honorable, how do you find your hunger? By asking, what breaks your heart? What really breaks your heart?
People who know me well know that I want to see our communities connected to each other. The polarizing moment that we are in this country is our greatest, dang you, is our greatest national security threat. And if we all don't wake up to the role that each and every one of us can play in connecting to our neighbor, in transcending the partisanship, and not identifying each other by what political party we believe in or subscribe to, or what the opinion is on a particular contentious issue. All of those things are external to the very notion of what you just described to us about Ubuntu.
Ubuntu.
We are. I am, because we are. The name of my nonprofit organization, which our board of directors recently voted to change as a result of the campaign I ran for Congress in this district, where our tagline was, "We are one," was this whole notion of bringing us together. We've changed the name of the organization to the We Are One Alliance, which is so beautifully reflected in what you just shared. You know, in a district where we were never supposed to be able to, in these partisan political times, be able to move the needle at all in politics. You know, we had an opportunity to outperform Joe Biden in this district by 3 points, which means that 3% of Donald Trump's voters in 2020 voted for Heather Mazier in 2022. Now, how did that happen? It happened because my great hunger asked me to put together events that were Heather in the hot seat. We're going to go into Republican houses to have difficult conversations about how we can transcend. And in each and every one of those conversations, I bring a deep dedication to no judgment and no guilt and shame, bringing great compassion for everyone's experience in their journey. And so thank you for asking, because that great hunger doesn't go away, even if I'm not the congresswoman. Because what I was modeling in my campaign as a candidate is how I want to continue to model how to be as a citizen, as a leader of a nonprofit organization that I hope more of you will get engaged with our work and our teachings. And because we are going to continue, we've been cooking up some really great initiatives that we're going to work on together in new programming to be announced at a future date on what we are calling the Sacred Dreams Project. And I want to turn back to you. A question that I think helps people hone into that space of what is that thing that motivates me more than all else? You can't really answer that question if you're not in touch with who you really are. How could you answer what is your great hunger and what breaks your heart if you're a little disconnected from yourself because you're too tied up in political arguing or your stresses in your life or how many social media likes you have in a particular post or any of the things that are our common distractions. We live in a life that is very, very encouraging of us to be outside of ourselves. You can't know the answer to those questions if you don't know who you are. And a couple of times while we've been together, I have the benefit of her staying with me on the farm. And so we've been having really beautiful conversations. You talk often about coming back to yourself each day, which is a practice that I employ in my own ways. Would you be willing to speak to our audience about what you do to come back to yourself? Because that is an essence of the spirit that can rise to answer that internal calling about a sacred dream.
Sometimes we live in a world that is expecting us, or often we hear, go in the world, change the world. So we are driven by this external need to change the world. And I always say, as my grandmother would say, until the female lion becomes the historian of her own story, the tale of the hunt will always glorify the hunter. Until you come home to yourself and really asking these questions, what wounds do I carry? What soul wounds do I carry? Where does the pain reside? How best can I change who I am so that I can face the world? Every morning I have to go through that, asking myself. My grandmother would say, do you have a dream? And do you have the voice that can speak to that dream? The voice is within. So for me to be able to speak to my dreams, for me to be able to speak to how I can be a value to the world, I have to heal what's within. Because I always say also to people when they listen to my story, they say, oh, Tererai, getting married and having babies at 14, being exchanged for a cow, because my great-grandmother, my grandmother, my mother and me, we were all exchanged for a cow. Oh, poor you, you must be a victim. And I always say, no, I'm not a victim, because I've decided to come to see and to feel and to hear who is within. Inside, there is no victim in here. I am the solution. I am part of the solution. And here is how I have decided to define who I am. I am a dreamer. I am the master and mistress of your own destiny. I refuse to let the past define who I am. Neither do I accept the challenges in my pathway become the narrative that others would use to define who I am. I defied the rules of my father. I defied the norms of my culture. I refuse to be silent about societal expectations that marginalize women and girls to be submissive at the expense of their own dignity, and I'll never be silent. Because I decided the good within me, and I can go in the world knowing who I am.
We're getting ready for some questions from the audience, but while that is happening, we're having some papers passed out to everyone, and I'll talk about that in a minute. So in relationship to that fifth dream and the community impact, one of the things that I'm excited to share with you is that Tererai's presence here in Chestertown is creating an incredible opportunity for us here on the Eastern Shore to join into that fabric of that dream and help it be a reality on how the children in the schools, in her communities, are going to have better lives because of us. When I met Tererai in September, I was at a conference that I thought I was going to go meet Elizabeth Gilbert. That was the reason why I was going to this conference. She was leading a workshop on exploring your creative capacity. And I've enjoyed many of her books, and I felt a strong pull to go. Such a strong pull that I even mentioned to my spouse, Deb, I don't know why, I just am being shoved to go to this thing by the universe. Well, after attending this weekend workshop, I came home to report, oh, I was supposed to go because I was supposed to meet Tererai Trent. And in our meeting and in our conversations, I come to learn that her schools and her dedication to the schools that are her fifth dream, and that you saw received initial funding from Oprah Winfrey, she now oversees 12 schools. And I found that only 4 of them have access to running water. And she told me, Heather, when we are able to drill the wells to give water access to the schools, we also create a very large garden that is the main food supply for the children each day. And I come to learn they also have gotten very enterprising and created contracts with supermarkets to bring the vegetables that are grown in these large garden spaces to market, and are using those revenues to support the salaries of the teachers and school supplies at the schools. So having the water access, as you can imagine, for just the issue of having access to water alone is a really important thing, but all the additional benefits. And immediately I was like, okay, my entire public policy career has been about protecting water, water access. There is an alignment here, along with the farm's work of the gardens. And we went to Maneri's Dream Alliance and connected up with the community gardens there yesterday. And there's this desire in my heart to say, Chestertown's got this. The Eastern Shore's got this. Our friends can help build these wells. And I'm excited to report to you that there's been such a beautiful response to this that we are now closing in on $45,000 raised to the $60,000 goal. And what I've passed out here to you tonight with this code, if you take your phone out and point your camera to the code, it will take you directly to our page that is tracking this progress. Now I'll tell you, there's about $12,000 that isn't accounted for on the bar yet because of additional checks I'm handing to Tererai this evening. But we are closing in on that $45,000 goal. And I am talking with some donors about helping to match some additional money that we might be able to bring in tonight for those who are inspired in hearing this conversation. So we're going to move into some question and answers, but I wanted you to know if you are inspired to be a part of helping these wells get built, you can just so easily do that by going directly to this website that is on the QR code. And it's deeply, deeply appreciated because nobody should not have access to water. And these children need food. And these teachers deserve salaries. And really, just as importantly, this incredible, phenomenal woman doesn't earn a salary from her work at Tererai Trent International. She's not even being paid to come and speak and do all the work in our community here this weekend. She's here to raise money for these children because of her great hunger. And if you are as touched as I am by this woman's great hunger, let us rise up to meet this goal before she leaves Chestertown in a couple of days. All right? So,
Present. So in the top of the baton, I want to leave this baton. That's how we have redefined, and I'm going to leave it to the president of this university as a community gift. It says the baton of quality education. Pass it on.
So we have some microphones set up in the back, or maybe TJ and Valentina would be willing to roam around with the movable mics if somebody wants to raise their hands. In the time that we have left, we've got time for some questions from the audience.
Hi. Hi, my name is Obella Obo. I really appreciated the amount of space you gave to talking about sort of like the harrowing bits of the journey. And also the ways that you connected those harrowing bits both to, you know, the struggles that people back home were having, as much as struggles that were existing here. I think a lot of times, so my dad is Ugandan, my mom was born and raised here in America, and there's this interesting way that I think Americans look at Africans and their circumstances and don't see themselves, even though those struggles exist here as well. And I'm interested in hearing about how, like, I love that you're doing education, especially for like young folks and giving them space to start to be able to process this stuff now. But I'm wondering what your experience has been as you're doing this healing work and education work with other adults, and how you make space for the grief that is connected to these circumstances. Like you talked about, you know, being in the corner of your house while rain is pouring through it, and it's beautiful to hear that you recovered from that, but also there's something that reads to me very clearly that the reason you can speak so honestly about it is because you faced it a bit more than I think a lot of folks have. And I'm wondering sort of like what that experience has been like for you, how you've seen it in like your peers as you make your way through this process, and then maybe also advice that you have around managing it.
Well, that's a loaded question. You know, I do these workshops and events where I do lots of training and coaching, and in my community we also do the same. If I can start from the community level, so we have this, we are now building a vocational training center because we realize the grandmothers and the mothers who did not receive their education, they need some skills. So we have a vocational training center where women can come in and they can do sewing, they can do whatever they want. So we provide those. And in the Western world, we do these workshops where we really talk about, because sometimes people they don't want to talk about their pain because there is not a space that has been created to talk about the pain. And it's important to create that space so people can own their own voices and they can be proud of who they are. Otherwise, we'll end up just defining people by their pain. You know, you might as well go running around with the story of, oh, she was married when she was young, she had babies and what have you, and that alone may diminish the power that came out of that pain. And I think when we celebrate our pain, we celebrate our achievements as well. That's, in short, that's what I can say, but I think it's a question that would require a full day.
Thank you.
Yes. And just to show that this whole donation link and giving thing is real, I get notifications when these donations come in. So let me thank David Simison in the audience who took us up on the offer to make a gift tonight. I know many people have already given as well, but sometimes, you know, I also have not gotten very involved in giving internationally before, in part because, oh my gosh, we have so many domestic needs, and I've always really put myself into taking care of our needs here locally, and because it feels so far away and it's harder for it to be that tangible and to know. So it's, for me, of course, helped that I've gotten to know Dr. Trent, and I'm so personally connected to overseeing this aspect of this project. I also want to reinforce, I'm getting to go to Zimbabwe in June to oversee some of this work, to be with Tererai in her village. And let me also say, if any other folks in the audience are interested in joining us, there's a couple more spots available on the trip as well. So if you're feeling inspired to be a part of this, there's a leadership tour that that Tererai Trent is sponsoring to her community in June, and you can talk to me about your interest in that too. Krista.
Hello, thank you. I need to put this down. Thank you so much. You are so inspiring. One of the things that popped up for me was you kept talking about the generation. I don't know why it gets me teary, but like after all you've been through, I was curious, like, how old are your children now, and how have they grown through this experience, and what do you see in them that you didn't see in past generations?
Well, my children, they are now their own independent people. So I have a child who graduated, the 9 year that I was afraid of, she graduated with an engineering degree from Oklahoma State University. And I have a child who graduated from Western Michigan University with biomedical sciences. She's pursuing medicine. And I have another one, she did. Well, before I talk about that, let me talk about someone else, because I always refer to this person, because this degree, I can't pronounce it. So, speaking about how do we, I always say I stand on the shoulders of others. I'm not going to take credit for everything that has happened in my life. And sometimes when we talk about issues around racism, issues around oppression, issues around colonialism, sometimes we forget there are others who really helped us fight the fight, even if they are on the other side of the fence or they don't look like us, but they're always there to help us, and we need to recognize those people, right? So when I came to the US, and I'm going to make it short and sweet, when I came to the US, I did my undergraduate, and my English was still very, very rough because I didn't get to go to school. I'll come to your question, and you remind me what was the question. I didn't get to really get the basics of the language, the Queen's language, and so I used to read romance novels. That's how I managed to get my English. And so when I finished my undergraduate, I was going to my graduate. But romance novels, they can take you so far. The English, it's limited. Sardonic, broad-shouldered, sardonic eyes. and so I'm in my graduate program, and I'm doing plant pathology, and I'm given this lab where I can work, and I'm sharing this lab with this guy, and for some reasons, I know the reasons. I can't stand the guy. He reminded me so much of those colonial masters back home, and I just said, I'm not going to touch white, and I'm sorry to say that, because of my own wounding. And so I couldn't stand this guy. He reminded me of rednecks. But the guy was just friendly, and but we're taking the same class. He was an adult, and I was also an adult, so we're taking the same class. And I would always sit at the back of the class because I had kids that were lying in the passageway, and I told them, don't move, don't make noise. When I come out of the class, then we can go and do whatever we need to be doing. And so the guy would always also stay behind in the class because he had some research that he was running to. So we had this assignment, and the professor says, can we talk a little bit about fungal diseases? And my hand was up, as always. I want to be the first one to say something, even if I'm saying something stupid. And I said something about the disease. My name is Tererai, right? And the professor said, Terari, listen, stop it, Terari. You need to practice your English before you come to this class. And I'm standing there, and this is a science class. I'm the only black person in this class. The rest are white, Asians, and they're kids, and they're giggling, and I'm thinking, gosh, do I sit down? And I could feel my vulnerability, and I'm almost teary, and the professor is just looking at me, trying to put me in my place. And this guy that I hated so much because he reminds me of a redneck, he stands up and he says, Dr. Conway, bullshit. Dr. Conway, this is just bullshit. Bullshit, and 3 times. And he said, you can't tell this woman to practice her English when you cannot even say her name. And he looked at me and he said, Tererai, you don't belong to this bullshit. Let's get out of here. He grabbed my hands. I've been with this guy 25 years.
All right, stand up. She was asking about your children.
Okay, then my children. Then I wanted to ask her, what is the other degree that Trent is doing? Kinesiology. So all of them, they are doing their own thing. I didn't want to ask him before I introduce you.
And how do they feel about this? I mean, you've just made such a strong leap for the people from your community, original community, plus everybody around you now. I mean, how do your children, what do you see in your children that you didn't see in past generations?
You know, my kids, you know, I want to believe they are proud of me. I want to believe that. Gosh, you know, I always say to my kids, never pick this baton. And, you know, I also want my grandkids never to pass on this baton. But it's not like it's a high expectation that I have over them. We talk about it, and I think they are grounded enough to realize what their mama has come through, and they don't want to repeat that. Yeah.
Let's move over to this side of the room. Beth?
I was wondering, how did you overcome the men in the village? Because you said that it was not allowed for women to get an education and that you were abused. And how did you get away from that person, and how did the village overcome those stereotypes, those restrictions?
Yeah. You know, I was even surprised myself that I thought I would get resistance from the community. But one thing that I have learned during this process is sometimes communities, they just want to see, they've never seen a woman as a role model. And that's seeing me doing these things, I think it shifted something. I always talk about this story of this old man, 70 years old. He's coming with a 7-year-old daughter of his, holding, and I could see him limping and coming to me and looked straight into my eyes and say, Tererai, can she be just like you? Wow. It speaks to when we see ourselves in others, when we have role models, it changes people. It makes people think twice. You know, there's no woman in my community who brought education. There's no woman who in my community who has sent so many kids to school. And kids are coming back and they are working and they're improving the lives of their communities. So they are now saying, gosh, women can do it. And that's why it's important to be role models in our communities.
And perhaps you could also speak briefly to what you discussed had been some of the communal thinking about deferring to boys going to school. It wasn't that girls couldn't or shouldn't be educated. It was some of it was the aspects of poverty that the community is facing.
Yeah. Many of our communities, we don't have social security, none at all. So when poverty hits at family level, at community level, you have to look at these two individuals, the boy and the girl. Who is more likely to get a job? So who is more likely that I can sell my cow or my goat so they can go to school? They will pick the boy. Because we have seen role models of men, they go to work in the factory mines, they go to work in the factories, they work in the mines, and they bring income home. We never saw a girl doing it. So it's a decision that parents have to make, and it's a drastic decision, and it's a bad decision, but it's being forced by poverty itself.
And look at what happens when somebody imagines a new dream.
Yeah.
You imagined yourself into that role that allowed others to now see it, and this 70-year-old man is bringing his daughter to you, begging for her to have an education now, because you saw this in yourself. You rose to the occasion of making this dream happen, no matter what. And now, countless other girls are being educated because you've shown the way. You've also come back to your fifth dream to create the opportunities and have yourself, and I've seen you, hold your life story and what you went through with a deep amount of compassion and forgiveness and understanding, while standing in your power and your voice and your vision.
And I think forgiveness is a good thing that we should all strive for. Otherwise, if I don't forgive, I become bitter. And we don't want to be bitter. You know, when I talk about the great hunger, ultimately when we don't find meaning in our lives, when we don't find forgiveness in our lives, we become bitter. Yeah.
TJ, do you have a question? Okay.
Thank you. You spoke about really that pivotal moment in your life when you were sitting in that circle and posed that question. And I'm just wondering, how did it come to be that you were sitting in that circle that day?
So when we gained our independence, like I said, all of a sudden we had all these foreigners coming in. You know, they were doing anthropology, they were doing all kinds of things, and it happened that because I was doing some what we call savings clubs, where you have women gathering and what have you. And so she came when we were discussing about what we needed to plant in our gardens. And so she found us sitting in the circle, and she joined that circle. And we didn't even know she was coming, but we saw her coming with some of the local people, and they were looking for women who were doing things in their lives. And I was part of that group. And so that's when she sat there, and she introduced herself as an aid worker. And when she came to the village, she was just a project officer. She had not yet been promoted to be the president and CEO of Heifer International. I was surprised when I walked into that organization to learn that she's now the president of the organization. And she remembered me. I couldn't believe it.
Nobody forgets Tererai, Trent. Who else has a question? We have 5 minutes left before we wrap up and go into the reception.
Thank you. Welcome, and is this on? My name is Maureen Jackson.
No,
and
hold on.
To the continent.
Mooney, just 1 second, sweetie. I think it did turn off.
Okay, so what am I doing? Oh, look, yeah, I am. Oh, wonderful you. Thank you, darling. I don't need any more technology, I will tell you. I've had enough. But I don't really have a question, but I have been to the continent many times. I haven't had the fortune to go to Zimbabwe, but what touched me so much is your relationship to me. My grandmother and grandfather reared over 300 children in their lifetime, orphaned by life circumstances. And my efforts right now is to try to preserve their memory on the few acres of land that's left, you know, in the Shenandoah Valley. So I know about that indomitable spirit. And I applaud you and I appreciate you. And I just am so grateful to Heather, who's my friend too, for having you here and for letting us know, you know, that you're here and what you're working on. So I just want to say congratulations and thank you for the uplift for me, because the battle is always quite difficult when you're doing these kinds of things. And you have the prayers and the hopes of our ancestors, that keep us moving forward. And, I do want to know one personal thing. You don't have to answer. What did you do about that husband of yours? You don't have to answer, but I'm hoping.
He is down under, dead. May I ululate to what you have just said, and may I give the ululation to our ancestors.
You didn't want them to know that you deported him before he died?
They'll read it in the book.
Speaking of the book, if any of you didn't get a copy and didn't get it signed, we're taking a big stack of them back home to the farm, and Tererai will be signing them, and I'll be getting them back to Tom Martin at the book plate, so you can still go to the book plate and tell your friends. There'll be some signed copies there they can get. And we always love supporting our local businesses, so we want the books to be purchased there. And thank you for being here tonight. Thank you for your enthusiasm, for coming. You all know somebody that's going to kick themselves for not being here tonight, right? And what I would love to come from this is a little whisper campaign through town. Heather Mazier is never going to bring us anything that isn't amazing. So if Heather Mazier is bringing somebody to town to have a conversation, or she's inviting you to a dialogue, get your bum in the chair. Because I promise you, all of our offerings will always, maybe never be as magical as this one. How can we ever top this? But I'm always going to bring to you those who will touch your heart deeply, who will re-inspire in you that sacred dream that each of you have. We are all so amazing and so perfect and so full of power that most of us are not even in touch with. And it's because we aren't in touch with that we're in the shape we're in this country right now. We're in a really important inflection point in this nation where we have to turn this around. And while I do a lot of talking about how we can talk with each other and improve the connections with each other, really the first step of the work is working to just know ourselves better. And to find that voice, that resilient, strong, empowered voice that we all have, but we've oftentimes been conditioned to silence or not be in touch with. And I promise to continue to bring forward programming that's going to help you and those in our communities be in touch with that and ripple that out. And it's going to continue to have an impact. I don't need to be your congresswoman to have the impact in this community that I wanted to have as your elected official. Quite honestly, I'm going to have a lot more fun doing this not being your congresswoman. Because I wouldn't have had the opportunity to go meet Tererai. I wouldn't have had the chance to think through the programming that she and I are going to offer. A broken ankle in October and 2 months on a couch unable to move gave me extra time to plan these sorts of things. But I'm so thankful to you, Tererai, for gracing us with your presence tonight, for blessing our community with your spirit, with your stories, and with the magic that you are inciting within each of us tonight to dream, to know ourselves, to think about what is our little hunger, what is our great hunger, to read your book, to join in your suggested rituals. Thank you.
Thank you, my friend.